Hey friends, I'm really excited to share with you today's guest, Marisa La Fata. She's one of those people that is just it she kind of transcends the material world and the realm of those things that seem intangible, ethereal, magical. And I had the opportunity to experience her leading a moon circle. This was way back pre-COVID times when we could all be together in large groups and dance and hold hands and sit in circle. And she was leading a full moon circle, and there was like this magnetic pull that she created in terms of the space and her being in energy. And I'm not sure why it took me so long to sit down and have this conversation with her. It's funny, she reached out a couple weeks ago asking to be on my podcast, and I was like, oh my God, why did I not think of this sooner? So all of that said, I'm super excited to share with you Marisa and her work. It goes beyond holding moon circles. She's really a healer of, basically everything. Mainly she works with women. She does have some platforms and some outreach in working with men, because our men are precious, and we all need healing. We all have that masculine and feminine energy that needs healing, that needs to be brought into balance. And so before I let Marisa and I's conversation unfold, I thought I would share one of my poems. So many of you know that I have written a book of poetry. It was inspired by so many things: my love of poetry, my love of writing, my love of reading. My grandmother, Margaret Benedictus, who was a poet herself, a writer herself. And I thought this poem would be appropriate to help introduce Marisa. I'm just feeling inspired to share. So this is from The Dark Moon, a book of poetry for Shavasana, written by me, Tessa Marie Tovar, illustrated by my talented, amazing sister, Megan Benedictus. And the poem is called Dare to Come Alive. What if today you woke up and told yourself, today my mission, my challenge, my practice is to pause and notice when I've gotten caught up in the fear and worry story. And instead of unquestioningly believing that outmoded narrative, could you begin to question the voice inside your own head? Who are you? Where did you come from? Why do you speak to me in this way? If you had to give the voice inside a face and a name, who would it be? If you had the liberty to choose your own ending, how would it go? If you had to make a guess at what your purpose is here, what would that be? Can you answer these questions? Can you practice the sacred pause and notice this present moment? No gripping, no expectation for a certain outcome. Can you stay engaged without becoming attached? Will you dare? I'm admittedly a little frazzled today. Did not sleep well last night, so I'm kind of just not firmly planted in my body, feeling not firmly planted in my body.
Do you want to do a grounding? I could take you through a little grounding.
That would be awesome. Yes, please.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, so we'll just start by closing down our eyes, and let's just take a really big, deep inhale into the center of the heart. Exhale, just letting everything go. Another deep inhale into the center. And as you exhale, just releasing everything that came before this moment. So all it took to get here, letting that go. Another deep inhale into the heart center. And as we exhale, just letting go of everything that is to come after, really bringing ourselves into the present, into our body, into this container that we're creating with each other. And let's just send a root from the base of our spine deep down into the center of the earth. Just feel it locking in, grounding us in that nourishment. And then tapping into the sun above, seeing that glowing orb of source light. Taking a deep inhale in, pulling that light from the sun into the crown. And as you exhale, sending that light down the spine, cleansing the body, letting it take any feelings that don't serve this moment, shape-shifting them, sending them down your root into the earth. And at your own pace, just taking some breaths, allowing that cleanse. Sometimes I like to see the light as like thick honey or lava, really capable of just grabbing everything, taking it out. And let's think of just a feeling that you would like to embody or feel more of in this moment. And maybe that is just peace or ease or grounded, just whatever comes to top of mind and heart. And try to go back in your memory bank and find a time when you felt that. So maybe an image comes up, something you were doing or an experience you were having. Allow your body to remember that energy and that feeling. And then imagine that feeling that the sun is just a mirror for that. So that light energy we're pulling into our body is that feeling. And then at your own pace again, just pull that feeling down the crown and spine, letting your body fill up with that. And exhaling with gratitude, sending it down the root into the earth. Maybe someone else will ground later and get a little of that medicine and that feeling. And then as we enter into our time together, just honor this safe and sacred space. To let go of expectation and just be with whatever is created. Asking our helping spirits and guides to join us for the journey. And then one last deep inhale in. Letting it go. Coming back into your body and into the space. And opening the eyes when you're ready.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So needed, so helpful.
Yes.
Marisa, I have so many questions for you. I'm so I love the background that you have. I know that you've studied with Don, is it Don Miguel Ruiz, his family? And that's a Toltec. Is it shamanic?
Yeah, so it's the Toltec path, and then it would be considered just a path of shamanism, a shamanic path. Yeah.
And he's got a few books, but the one that comes to mind is The Four Agreements. I think it's one of his most well-known.
Yeah.
Before we dive into that, though, because I feel like I'll snowball ahead of myself, can I have you, if possible, describe yourself in one sentence? You can try.
Okay, in one sentence. I- So I would say that am, I just feel like I'm just a woman on a journey to release her story and to always be reminded that I'm actually a spiritual being having a human experience
Mm,
and not the other way around.
that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a good. I feel like you are. I mean, my experience of you, and I've had. We had it was like a full moon circle, I think, at Imagine Yoga Studio, and you were leading it from the perspective of spiritual healing, and I mean that's very much how you showed up. So that's how I experienced you.
Oh, I didn't know that you were there. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean I don't think I got introduced. It was a big group. There were
It
like
was a really big group.
30 women there, and it was
Yeah.
such a cool um it was such a cool vibe. It was, and I mean
Yeah.
imagine that's part like you infused, part all the studying that you've done infused, and so yeah, it comes through in your work.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That was my first, I moved here and that was the first ritual and circle that I had done. I just moved back like 24 hours before that
Oh wow, that's
night. Yeah.
just
So
moved back.
I just moved back and it was like this kind of initiation of me bringing this work from where I was to here. And it just worked out. I mean, it was really, really beautiful sign from the universe. Like, you can do this here, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So
and that
it was
was
really cool.
it was like 3 years ago, maybe
Hmm.
more, something like that.
Yeah. Almost 3 years.
Well, welcome back to the Pacific Northwest.
Thank
Happy to
you.
have you.
Thanks.
Um, but before that, so I'd like to hear your origination story, kind of like what drew you to the work that you do, how you found it, why it is, why you think it is the thing that you were drawn to, and
Hmm.
could you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah. Um, I hate to do that thing where you start like, well, when I was a kid, when I was born different. No, I mean, so I had a very, just, it really was true. I felt like from the time I had awareness, like I was raised in such a beautiful, loving family. But when I had kind of awareness of other people, of what their experience was of me or what they thought of me or fitting in, it was like as soon as I kind of left the realm and safety of family and into the world, I was very uncomfortable.
Mm,
And there is, so interesting to feel so much love by your family, but then to feel so unlovable in the world and so
mm,
scared and insecure. And that feeling just continued to manifest. And when I, was in my early teens, I really turned to drugs and alcohol to like suppress that feeling. So so I could feel okay, like walking into a room or having conversation with someone. Um, but that journey really just led to a lot of anger, and a lot of grief. So that moment that would last of me feeling confident and happy and whatever would maybe last a couple hours. And then it was like every single thing and like all of my shadow pieces would come out.
mm,
And I was just, I go through like rage and anger. And I was just kind of a tornado of emotions and like self-destruction. And probably anyone else who was in the past. It was just like a very selfish and self-centered experience. But I was afraid. I was young. Necessarily I didn't know what was happening. I wasn't aware.
mm.
But I did have the opportunity, with that I think comes a lot of suicidal thoughts and a lot of just, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. It was exhausting being alive. It was exhausting trying to manage being alive with drugs and alcohol. And I had kind of my first spiritual experience when I when I decided I was going to end my life. And I had a moment of clarity. I like literally sobered up and I saw in the mirror like this other version of myself that was like, this can be different for you. And you're
Wow.
part of, like, you're part of the problem and I love you, but like you're not a victim.
Mm,
And it was the first spiritual experience I had where I really felt like something outside of me was telling me, like, it was pretty intense, and that led to me going to treatment, and that led to me getting sober. And that was 13 years ago in January. Um, so sobriety was just like kind of the starting point. And but in that journey of sobriety, I was learning to like myself. I could say, like, I was learning to like myself and be in the world, and I was healing old wounds, and I was doing a lot of work, but I was still afraid, and I had a lot of anxiety, and I was so worried about what people thought of me, and I felt trapped. I didn't feel like I knew who my true self was, because I was always trying to be a version of myself. Whoever wanted, whatever version you wanted, I was going to be that for you. And I just did not feel connected to source, to anything. And it was another moment of desperation. And in that moment, I picked up the Four Agreements. And it was like my second major aha spiritual moment, where it felt like everything I felt in my heart about what it meant to be alive was in that book. That everything about me, my name, who I was, the religion I was raised in, like, everything was passed on to me. Like, I was domesticated, and there's this book of law I'm carrying around, and it's my parents and my ancestors and the culture and the country I live in. And like, what would my life look like if I was able to release that entire book, release my story, and say, well, who am I today? And like, how do I want to live this life? Because I'm just going to die. So like, at that time, I was like, I'm just going to die anyway. So what is the whole point of me being miserable all the time? Like, what would it look like if I loved myself so unconditionally that I could be free and live out the rest of my days just happy and not afraid and anxious?
Wow.
And that was like the big, I mean, that makes it sound like, so, it's not that easy to just make that defining moment. There's like a lot of pain in the side of it. It's like the Cliff Notes version, but like, that's just what I wanted so bad. I just wanted to love myself and not be afraid of you or what anyone thought, or like, what would I look like if I was just me,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big opening.
You're touching on something that I think about a lot, because I've had a similar experience in my upbringing. A love, a family that's full of love and acceptance, but then stepping out of that family womb and heading out into a world that doesn't feel like it's accepting of you. And I always find that it's so, the debate of nurture versus nature, and what makes us who we are, and what guides us on our path to be somebody who is um fully actualized, fully in our body, able to show up in the world and do our work, versus someone who really feels like they're stuck in fear or frozen in just being ashamed of who they are. And I think it's, I don't think I've ever talked to someone else who's had such a similar experience as me, because here's what I'm getting at. I think it seems like oftentimes there's a stigma with someone who's had a really rough upbringing, like their family nucleus is toxic, it's abusive, it's violent. And then we go, oh, well, of course, this person is struggling with alcohol and addiction and self acceptance and self love, because look at their family model. But I think it's really interesting when you have such a loving environment at home, but it's like the culture and the world around you, it feels like it's dangerous, scary. You can't be who you are without being judged. And so I
Yeah.
wonder about, as you started to dive into the Four Agreements and studying with the Reese family, did that come up in your healing journey? Was that kind of cultural? What is it? I mean, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing that comes to top of like heart when you say that is that I think it's all about unconditional love. Like, in my family, and it wasn't that my family was perfect. Like, nothing's perfect, but I am blessed to have a family where there's kind of this like agreement that no matter what we like, we're going to love each other no matter what. It didn't mean that we were always going to be super kind and loving, or there wasn't any drama or trauma or things, but like, it was kind of a non-negotiable. I knew that, and that felt safe. And I think in the world, as soon as you enter into the world, um, that unconditional love, you don't know. Like, you don't know if this person's gonna like you or not. And I think I would show up not as my, like, there was no confidence. I didn't have that confidence out there. And I think part of that is just maybe just our human experience, like, of what we're like when we're growing and we're coming out of our cocoon and into who we are. Like, we're doing that with a bunch of other young people that don't know who they are, and there's like drama, and you're making fun of each other, and you're calling people names, and you're making up mean nicknames, and like there's all this stuff going on that's like, that can be so traumatizing. But it's just a bunch of little people that don't really know like what's going on or if they're hurting people, right? And then it's like, that's kind of how I started my, it was like being birthed into this like container of a bunch of people who, like, like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's
Totally.
like,
Yeah.
it just feels like so much of what I felt, or like the agreements I made. So the 4 agreements really talks about, most of the beliefs we have about ourselves, especially the limiting ones, come from a moment where we made an agreement with someone else. And when I started to do that work, when I was like, okay, where did I make this agreement that that I was stupid? Like, where was the first time I felt someone told me I wasn't smart? And I went back, and it was 4th grade. It was a 4th grade teacher that told me that I was stupid because I had a really difficult time learning. And then I think what happens is I made that agreement, and then I evidence gathered for the rest of my life. And I made that agreement, and that was my story. I shifted. I'd say, well, I'm not book smart, but I'm soul smart. So I'm emotionally intelligent. So if you need me for that, I'm good. But don't ask me to do math or tell you about World War II. I like adjusted the story kind of to make myself feel good inside of it. But I always felt I was stupid because I made that agreement. And then all along my way, I evidence gathered, that was the agreement I made. So those little kids that might have said, oh, you're fat, or you're ugly, you have buck teeth, I could have a complex about my teeth for the next 26 years because I agreed with them that, oh gosh, there's something wrong with my teeth. You're right. Did that answer? I don't know if that answered your question. I just, okay. That was part of it.
Well, yeah. And I think that's key in the first step of understanding how to heal, like how to move on from that person who is young and in that collective container of being young alongside all these other people who are trying to figure it out, and who are scared of being judged, and who are having a very similar experience, probably. I mean, I think it's far and few between the kids that grow up totally self-assured throughout adolescence and teenage years. And we don't know it in those moments because we're so wrapped up in our own experience. And even as adults, gosh, I all the time am just wrapped up in my own experience. But it does make sense. Yeah. What were you going to say? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's like a tool I feel like we have to learn, right? Like, I had to learn how to be, how to hold space for other people's experience, to not only be thinking of myself. And I think that's what's beautiful about the agreement of, like, don't make assumptions and don't take things personally, because we do just innately make everything about us.
Mm-hmm.
And
can we dive into the 4 agreements? Because I know 3 of them off the top of my head, and I always forget the 4th one, but I believe the first one.
I always forget one of them, which is like ridiculous, but that's okay. I'm just going to pull it up because I did this the other day. Someone asked me, and it was like, why is there always one? And it's always the one that I need to work the hardest on, which I'm pretty sure is not making assumptions. That's the one. So, so it's, the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Mm-hmm. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best, and don't take anything personally.
Yeah.
So,
and those are, I mean, those are such, like, if you could stop and say those and just kind of let them sink in for a second, and then it's like, okay, well, we have to unpack those a little bit because those are big statements, and how do you actually do that?
Right. I mean, and I think that's what my journey of that was, I think, in 2015 when I found the books, and then I read all of the books, started going on retreats, got to know the family, just beautiful, humble, amazing family. Like, just really felt yeah, just it's been a really awesome experience. And then diving into doing Heather Oshmeyer, she's does warrior goddess training, and she was an apprentice of Don Miguel. Like taking a lot of her classes and learning from her, and then Jose, apprenticing with him and just learning from him and building a relationship and just really immersing myself. But in that time, kind of on my own, it wasn't necessarily like anyone was walking me through it in the same way I walk women through it now, but I just knew that like I had to unlearn. I had to unlearn everything that was in that book. And then the tools, as I was unlearning everything, the tools were in those 4 agreements. So, and like that if I was not making an assumption, that I would probably react in a different way. And whenever I make assumptions, they're usually out of fear. Oh, I said the wrong thing. Oh, someone's going to misinterpret. Oh, someone thinks I'm stupid. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, she's not calling me back. She thinks I don't know what I'm like, and I lived my whole life like that, making so many assumptions. So when that book was like, oh, what would your life look like if you didn't make an assumption? I was like, these are practices. This is not a book that you read. Like, this is how you go out and live life. Like, yeah. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. So what would it look like if I practiced not making assumptions? And I realized that I stayed out of my head. And I lived in my mind 90% of the time. I had the most abusive mental relationship with myself. And when I stopped talking to myself and I had nothing to listen to, like, guess what happened? My heart just came soaring out of my chest and wanted to talk to me. Mm-hmm. Like, it was a completely different life experience. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Now I have to keep going and exploring it because it's crazy magical.
Yeah. I love it that you say top of heart. I noticed you said that a couple times, top of heart, instead of, the saying is generally top of mind, or what comes to mind first.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I love that you say top of heart, because it really is a practice of settling back into the body, just like how we started. We started with a meditation to help me get grounded, because I've been running around all day in my head.
Yeah.
And you helped me settle, and now here I am.
Yeah.
Feels better. So, okay, so don't make assumptions, and your kind of bellwether or red flag for that when you are in that assumption making place is you're noticing that it's usually surrounded by fear. And so you're able to acknowledge that at some point. Maybe you've like already gone down the path a little ways, or had some sort of thought process or storyline going, and then you're able to acknowledge it. Do you just sit there and like tell yourself, oh, that's fear? Or how do you acknowledge that and then kind of change gears?
Yeah. So a big part of this journey has been tapping into what I like to call the compassionate observer. So a lot of along the way, I connected to like spirit or a guide that is a part of me that I like to call my higher self. And she's my compassionate observer. And because I work with her so much now, it's a lot easier for me when I hear the voice, like the voice of fear or the voice of judgment, or the voice of the victim, the voice of the higher self and the compassionate observer comes with them now. So what happens is I have my human experience, because in the beginning I thought I could get rid of my human experience and just fully live in that like primetime place of personal freedom. But no longer is that the goal. And it's just not, that's not what we have, like I had to learn to be in the world. I didn't want to use something else to check out. I had to learn how to be in the world as it was. And so in that moment, when I'm feeling fear and the judgment comes, it really truly feels like I have this separate out-of-body experience, that today I can observe what's happening to me without diving deep down the well into that place of catastrophic thinking and total overwhelming anxiety. I'm not saying that I haven't been to that place. When that happens for me, it's usually, I call it going to the underworld. And that does happen, but that's usually something going on like on a much bigger spiritual level for me. When it's something small, like an uncomfortable interaction with someone or something like that, where maybe I make an assumption, that experience, I don't have to go to that dark place. That I can have the experience of being afraid, of being anxious, but at the same time, that other person's there loving on me. And like a lot of times that just looks like me physically putting my hand on my heart and being like, I love you, you're safe, you're fine, you're just moving through this, time's going to heal it, and it's okay. It's also okay if you're rejected. It's okay if someone misunderstands you. Like it's okay, like to take the power out of what once would be a really devastating situation for me if somebody thought I was stupid or I wasn't good enough, or would just send me in a spiral. Whereas now it's like I can hold space for both. So I'm having the experience, but it's not taking over me for like 3 days to a week, or even if it pops up every day for 3 days, each day gets a little bit easier. I don't want to make it sound like I'm not having the human experience. I hope that makes sense, that like I just have this little extra tool now that it's a pause, it's a reminder, like nothing this person, because really, especially when it comes, don't take anything personally. Like how I'm able to wrap my head around that is like, you had a whole life experience that up to this moment has created who you are. And I know nothing, there's no way I would know it. Even if we were best friends, there'd still be so much I don't know. What you think, what you believe, how you experience me, like you have your own filter. And so if there's something about me that doesn't resonate or align, then it's okay, because that's your experience, and that it should be normal for us to believe that's okay. Instead of expecting everyone to see the world as we do, because we just assume that my pair of glasses looks like yours.
Right. Well, and I so appreciate that from the lens of I think to myself a lot. This is something that I learned from my parents as a prayer when I was young. We would sit in front of our altar, and my mom and dad taught me the prayer to ask for a reminder that I would always be okay, and for a white light to guide me and keep me safe, and for health and happiness and help when I needed it. And so I so deeply resonate with that in the way, because I always, as I study healing work myself, I always think about this idea of, what does it mean to tell someone that they will always be okay? There's almost like this underlying, well, then nothing bad's ever going to happen to you. No tragedy will ever befall you. It's like that's what we want to believe. We want to believe that we won't have to go through pain and hurt, and that's not allowing yourself to have a full human experience. And that's not what I'm saying at all when I'm saying remember that you will always be okay. It's remember that no matter what happens, as you go through tragedy, as you go through betrayal, as you go through devastation, that there is a calling to connect within yourself. There is an inviolate place inside of your self, and a calling to connect with that and use that as a way to explore the shadow, to explore that to explore that rejection, to explore that other person's lens of you. And I just appreciate you bringing that up. It actually made me a little bit emotional to think about, oh yeah, it is okay. It is okay if someone doesn't like what I have to say, or doesn't resonate with my offerings, or has a different belief. We totally forget that. We want everyone to think that, it's all roses all the time. We all have to get along and agree on the same thing in order for us to have this beautiful human experience. And that's just not, not what we're saying at all. So thank you for reminding me of that. I've been thinking about that a lot today. And, that's the theme in my life that comes up. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. That reminds me of just that like small moment where like I don't have to make another agreement in that moment. Like I don't have to make an agreement with you. I can respect your experience without saying, oh, she rejected me, then I'm wrong. Now I'm not going to do this anymore. Like I don't have to make that agreement that I just have been spending so much time trying to unlearn. I don't have to use that as evidence. I can just simply say, okay, that's hers. But I also think it's important. I think the other thing we learn is to actually, like, I think you mentioned it, reflect on what is ours inside of it. because maybe there is an apology needed, or there is clarity, or I can say, oh, you're right, I was wrong. Like, I'm really sorry I hurt you. That wasn't my intention. Like, that we can also disagree and come to a space and not have to like go, especially right now with everything going on in people's families and just how drastically we can be on opposite sides. Like,
Yeah.
that's why the unconditional love is so powerful, because it helps you to navigate,
It does. Yeah, it's such important work. And so what we're talking about right now, I'm always trying to like categorize things and maybe to a fault, but I'm trying to move us through the four agreements. And we've talked
Okay.
about be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions. And are we kind of still in that wheelhouse of this example?
So I think talking about not making assumptions about what people think, not taking things personally, and then I think being impeccable with your word, that practice was really about not only how I speak to others, but how I speak to myself. So much transformation occurred when I began to be impeccable with my word, with myself. And that's where that compassionate observer came in, because it was like, I met her in a guided meditation, and it's that part of me that loves you so much that I'll be impeccable with my word to you. But then when I get home and I'm with myself, she might not have the same feelings, right? So like, there's this part of me that knows how to love unconditionally. And I had to tap into her to learn how to speak to myself in a kind and loving way, and to be impeccable with my word. And then the last one is doing your best. I mean, my favorite thing, if anyone ever gets to go see Miguel Jr. speak, is, I don't know if he does it every time, but I've seen him a lot, and he does this. He'll show up, and like, he'll get on stage and he stands like really tall and proper, and he's like, I am Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. and I don't take anything personally. Like, he goes through all the agreements. He's like, I don't make assumptions. I always do my best, and he's like, he really, like, from the start, he basically says, like, look, like, do not use these agreements as contingencies now that you use to like beat yourself up, or like, don't use these against yourself. These are not they're practices. Like, that's what I really heard from that, is that it's a practice. It's not another expectation or another thing for your book of law that you can use to judge and victimize yourself. And so I think that's what when I think of always doing my best, that's what I think of. I think of him standing there like, he's just doing his best. I'm just doing my best. Because it was one of the questions I really had in my heart that day. Like, the first time I met anyone from the family, I was like, I got to know if they literally take nothing personally. Like, I have got to know.
How do you do that?
How do you do it? Now, I still think Don Miguel Ruiz Sr., I think I think he is just there. Like, I personally, every time I see him, I make that assumption that like, this guy's living his best life. He's way up there, but yeah, that's what kind of doing your best, I feel like. And then it's just this cycle and this practice, and when you start to integrate it in your life, it just has such a profound effect.
Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. It really does.
I love that. I think that's one of my favorites. Always do your best. And I always like to add this ... and remember that your best changes from day to day, moment to moment, hour to hour.
Oh, yeah.
It's always changing. So don't hold yourself to a particular standard. And everyone's always doing their best, even if their best does not look good enough to you. Even if their best is not good enough to you, that person over there is doing the best they can with the tools they have in this moment right now. I think that's my favorite agreement.
Yeah.
And it was one that it took me a while to wrap my head around, because I was like, well, what does that mean? Are we not allowed to make mistakes? Are we not allowed to say things we don't mean? And, how do you be this perfect person who's always doing your best? And that's not at all what they're saying.
No. And sorry.
No, go for it. You go.
Oh, I know. I get all fired up about this because, It is truly one of the things that and probably because of my own journey, like I truly thought I was going to I could perfect myself in this way of healing, right? And I had like this amazing experience with Jose Ruiz in the desert on a retreat. And we're like sitting there under the stars and we're talking, and I had a huge anxiety attack during the retreat, like this out of body panic attack that was so bad. And I was like, and I posted something about on Instagram and Jose saw it. So after, bless his heart, he had just been facilitating all night. Everyone was leaving, and he's like, well, what happened? Well, and I was like, I just told him, and he's like, oh, you're having a spiritual detox. And I was like, well, shouldn't I be done detoxing? I've been detoxing for 12 years, 11 years, whenever. I'm like, come on. And he's like, no, you're not done, And it really shifted things for me. It made me realize that, for one, I'm not broken. I'm not broken. And when I talk about healing work, because that's the word I use all the time, like healing work. What do you do? Oh, I do healing work. I'm a healer. It's not like healing the broken pieces of self. It's not like, oh, you need to transform who you are because there's something wrong with who you are. That's not what it means to me. It's really like loving all parts of me all of the time, even the parts that feel crunchy or weird, or maybe wasn't like the best thing I could have done that day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so
It's all of
important
it.
to point out. I really, I talk to my teacher about this all the time. She's always like, Tessa, you just love your shadow work. You love to have you heard the term spiritual bypassing?
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
always like, well, what if I'm spiritual bypassing by not allowing myself to have this deep, raw, and tragic experience? And I just love to like wallow in my sadness, and it's almost like that's more comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I made that agreement with myself a long time ago. um, but I wonder if you could speak to that about how to know how far to go into shadow. I think there's a fear, at least for me in my experience, that I know what it feels like to be depressed.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken antidepressants, anti-anxiety a few times throughout my life, and I always worry that I'm going to get back to that place where I was when I could not function, where I was
Mm-hmm.
flunking classes, where I wasn't showing up for my job, where I was not
Mm-hmm.
feeling like a person who could be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a scary place to be, and I don't want to I also don't want to reject that part of myself that needs the attention, that needs the shadow
Mm-hmm.
work, that needs something keeps coming up. So how do we integrate the shadow without kind of, is it wise? Like, when is it wise? How is it wise? And how
Mm.
long? There's
Yeah,
so many questions in there I have.
I know. And I'm sure the answers will be different for anyone, like
Yeah.
in their own experience. And the first thing that popped up when you were sharing that feeling initially, actually, where I think there's this borderline, is the addiction to suffering.
Mm.
And it's something that they talk about a lot in the Toltec path, is that we have this addiction to suffering. And at first you're like, excuse me, like, I don't want to suffer. What are you talking about? But actually, that feeling is so comfortable. It's way more comfortable for me to hate on myself than to love myself, right? Well, not today, but like in the beginning of my journey, like that was way more comfortable. And we get comfortable. And then the thought of doing those other things, or being light, or being happy, especially if like we've experienced a lot of pain, sometimes it's even hard to go to that place because you're waiting for the shoe to drop on you. You're waiting for something to go wrong. And so I think this other thing happens too inside of the work, where one of my biggest things has been that I would be constantly immersing myself in transformation and healing. And COVID's been really interesting because it paused me on all my spiritual retreats. It paused me on a lot of things I was going to do for my own personal journey. And I realized that like we have to have time. It's like, do some healing and then sit with who you are after you did that little bit of healing. Just sit with it. Just be with what you, before you run off to the next retreat, run off to the next workshop, run off to the next thing you need to heal yourself with. Like, can you just be there for a little bit, Marisa? Like, can you just be there and see what's happened? And then go into the next thing. And I think it's also trusting that the bigger shadows take longer time. So when they're always there below the surface, but I think that when they're ready to completely rise up and come to the surface is when we're ready to actually handle them, because we let them come all the way out and we say, okay, I'm ready to work on this. So I think it's trusting too that spiritually there's something going on with us where I really do feel like those shadow pieces know that we're not ready. And then when we're ready, we get to work on it. And I think I find some freedom in that for myself, knowing that there's still some things going on, but I have to trust that I have to move through the next whatever experience I'm supposed to have in order to heal it. Like it's just not ready to be seen by me yet because I don't have the tools I need yet, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a lot of trust for self. And that is where like so much of the work I do, well, that's like I don't know what the word would be, but like my intention around all the healing work I do with women is around them returning to a place of trust for themselves, even inside the work. Like when you come to see me for a session, you're not coming for me to heal you. Like you're coming to heal yourself. You know, it's building that trust. So that you know that it's like all in due time. Mm-hmm. All will be revealed and I can do it. Kind of going back to that, like I'm going to be okay. Like I have what I need.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that, does that answer? Sometimes I'm a tangenter. I go on tangents, and then I'm always like, did that answer your question?
Did I just say?
Did I say?
Yes,
I get so
feel
passionate.
Like
just start talking.
I totally resonate with that. I feel like I do the same thing. But I think it's, and anything that comes up, that's what you're feeling and thinking, and right. That's what was meant to come up. So yes, yeah. It's helpful to me, and I think it's just a reminder that that I often forget to trust the process, and I often forget to trust myself, and I often forget to seek the answer within first. I often seek that next retreat, that next certification, that next person who has traveled down that path and is wiser and more experienced than me to show me the way, which I think there's value in that. But I really like what you said about, can you pause in between, sit with yourself? How are you feeling? Like, what is all of this work looking like in your physical body right now? And how can you use that? Or how can you just integrate it? Maybe even it doesn't need to be used per se, but felt.
Give yourself some time to shine. Like you just did. You just went to the underworld. So like come back up for air. I call it the underworld because that's what Jose called it that one day, and I realized like my fears, I'll get trapped, like you were talking about. Like what if I get trapped in that place where my anxiety feels so overwhelming, or I feel so all consuming, and so that's that place where it's like when I am in the upper world, have permission to be in that, it's all good, and then realizing every time I return, it's for medicine, it's for something greater. I come out stronger. I get to help someone else with it. Like it's going to be okay. Like those are the mantras I use. I don't always feel that strong. I speak with a lot of strength now because it's how I've rewritten my book of law. But let's be clear, I'm not just walking around like telling my feelings what to do in my mind. You know what I mean? But like, it's kind of like I believe in my heart though now that I have the power to do that. That like I believe that in my heart. So even if my mind is not on board, I believe it in my heart.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge part of all this work because I unlearned a lot of that stuff, and I replaced it with a very empowered spiritual being.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up COVID and the times that we're living in right now, and this being kind of like a great collective pause for us all to reflect. And on that same thread, I wonder, what is the importance of like daily ritual in a time like this, or daily well-being habits, or what do you suggest doing with your time?
Oh man. So this is big, and this is actually like the root of my most recent like offering creation is so first of all, I feel like there are so many women, men, all people let's take the gender out of it, sorry, but there's so many people doing this kind of work. They're out there empowering people, they're connecting people, they're sharing tools of healing. There are so many resources. And I really truly believe that what saddens me is I know there are a lot of people out there that are really lonely. They feel really disconnected and they don't feel like they have community and they don't feel like they have love. And the thought of just like randomly joining one, I think is really scary for some people. But I think the first thing I always want to encourage is that if you're listening to this today and you're hearing my voice and I'm saying, please come to our community, please come to our Sisters of the Moon Circle. It's once a month, like heed the call. If you hear someone else saying, please come to this class, like heed the call, go, like see the invitation, like the universe is inviting you to participate in something, to be held and feel loved. And I really feel like in the beginning of COVID, a lot of people were like, I don't want to do any more Zoom meetings. I don't want to do any more of that. Like it's too disconnecting. Yeah. But it was like, I kept trudging on because I knew that they would return, because you know what I mean? Because they were going to receive the same thing, even if it was over Zoom, with like that block. So I do think that community, feeling like you're in a container with other people, sharing, listening to other people, knowing that you're not alone. Like it's so important for us to know we're not alone in our thoughts and our fears. So I think finding community is really important. And then non-negotiables, I think, you know, one thing I've learned about myself in ritual is that I allow myself to not put, when I rewrote my book of law around my spiritual practice and what ritual and what what's that word? Discipline looks like. What's that word again? Forget that word. I released myself. I was like, what if like I could meditate in the shower, or when I was walking around, or looking at a plant, or what if I took away the idea of discipline? And like, I want my whole life to be a container of magic like that. I want to be able to do ritual no matter where I am. And so, but I love to use cards. I love to journal, guided meditations. I love to surround myself with plants. I love to see the earth. I love to walk. I love to run. Like I try to have all different kinds of ritual in my life. If it's just using sage and incense, if it's taking a bath with salt and essential oils, like I've created my life as such where if I had to do ritual right now, I could do it. And I don't even need, and I could go to this cosmic realm inside of my brain. I don't even need to have sage or any of the other stuff. Like I could just go there and do it. And so I think that like exploring what those practices look like from a space of what do you want to do, not what do you feel like you have to do, but like what would really be fun for you, and call it ritual, call it your practice, and own that that's what makes you feel good, you know, and that it doesn't have to be anyone else's. But I think having that, so I do the Circle Sisters of the Moon once a month, and I realized that 30 days would go by and some of the women I wasn't getting to connect with. And I know how it feels to get really inspired and then 4 days later not feel the same because you're not in that container. So what I felt called to do this year was to create, of course it's online because that's just the way it's got to be right now, but like a digital cauldron to keep. So if you're scrolling your apps and you're scrolling Insta, you could scroll a feed and get meditations, a new moon ritual, women connecting. You did the meditation, you type like what animal came up, and I can tell you what the animal meant, like a full on interactive, like let's keep our container every day, like every week, every month, like we're together, we're in the theme of the month right now is creativity. So you feel held by this theme, like you feel immersed in the energy of moving forward, which is so hard right now when it feels like we're really stagnant. So I think that whatever helps you feel like you're moving forward, that you're feeling inspired, that you're feeling connected, whatever that is for you. But there's also this belief, I think there's a lot of blocks. The main blocks I hear is I don't have time. You know, I don't have time. And it's like, if you don't have time now when you're stuck in your house,
there's just no way.
And that's a whole other rabbit hole, because that's all about like our value and our self-worth, and you know, believing we deserve just as much time as our children or our partner or our business.
Yeah, totally. So, can you tell me, can you kind of paint the for those people that have never been to a moon circle, can you kind of paint the picture of, and it's totally fine if it changes every month, but can you give me kind of a visual
Yeah.
representation of what a moon circle would look like?
Yeah. So right now we're doing it on Zoom, so we don't get to do as much of the hands-on ritual, but um, a big part of my offering are these shamanic visioning meditations. It's this practice of going within, connecting to your higher self, the other realm, your spirit guides, and listening to the heart, right? So all these circles, we start in the mind. There's usually a theme. We'll circle up. Everyone says their name, and just everyone will speak their name into the circle, and then I have a theme and a teaching for whatever it is going on. So I'll speak to that, and we kind of, we get to be in our mind a little bit about it, and then we go into the heart. So then we do a shamanic visioning based on whatever the theme is. And these visions are things that I don't ever prepare. They're not pre-written out. They're just my own experience in the other realm and with the collective and what's going on. And they're very visual. So if you have a hard time with meditation, this is the perfect kind of meditation to start with, because I'm guiding you the whole way. And it's also a good place for you to trust yourself. Like I always tell, if I say you're in the desert and you found yourself on the beach, then stay in the beach. Like this is a place for you to practice what you want, what you desire, and where you want to be. Trust what you're seeing. People are always tripped up about their animal. Well, I saw this animal and this animal. I asked myself, is that what I wanted to see? And I'm like, if that's what you wanted to see, then good for you. Like, yes, that's what you wanted to see. That's what you called forward. Like, it's this beautiful place to practice that trust, that like self-trust. So we do the visioning on whatever our theme is. And then after that, there's some journaling, and then all the women share about their experience, about what they saw, what they felt, what came up for them. And so often it doesn't necessarily match what maybe they thought in their mind was going to come up, because we gave the heart that 20 minutes to come forward and explore and be heard. And it's just a really beautiful experience. And then everybody shares, and and then we circle out, and usually there's like a tool and some medicine to take with you for the rest of the month. And the women, even being on Zoom, I feel like you can really connect and get to know each other. And just, even if you're not talking every day or you don't get their phone number, every month you show up, every month you see a lot of the same women, and sometimes people pop in and out at random, but and it's not clicky, there's no judgy, there's no, oh, how many times have you been here? And oh, I've been here from the beginning. Like there's absolutely none. You wouldn't even know. Sometimes there's like too many women, like you wouldn't even know. So I think it's a really comfortable place for you just to show up, and you can share or not share. There's no pressure. I don't call on people or make them do anything they don't want to do. So yeah, that's and it's 90 minutes. So it's always an hour and a half. And right now it's on the first of every month, because we're going through this book called The Grandmother of Time. Ooh. And oh, it's so amazing. It's written by this woman, Susanna Budapest, like back in the 70s. I think she was like the first like witch to get arrested for doing a tarot reading, like back in the 70s. She's incredible. Really? Yeah, she wrote this book basically called The Grandmother of Time, where there's a message for each month. And this book came recommended to me because I was tripping on something, and then she's like, oh, it was December and I wasn't busy. My friend was like, dude, it's December. Like, you're not even in alignment. You need to read this book. And I realized she had written this book that takes you through the month. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if I just released my idea of time altogether? Like everything I would be doing, what if I just let all of it go and I only align myself with what she's saying? This is what the earth, the universe, the great mother, spirit, this is what this month is about. What would my life look like? And oh my gosh, started in December and now we're in February, and it's been so cool. So I had such a profound effect on me that I told all the women, I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. This is what we're doing for the next 12 months. We're all getting on board. We're aligning with the month. So it's this other like longer journey that's happening too for everybody, which makes it a little more powerful. And all the medicine and magic of this woman who wrote this book, and she's passing it on to us. And it's been really, really neat.
So it's called The Grandmother of Time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
Uh,
grandmother of time.
Okay, I'm gonna make a link for that in the show notes, and I'm gonna definitely buy that book. So March 1st would be your next moon circle.
Yeah, March 1st, from 7 to 8:30
Okay.
p.m. Um, and you can find the links. Usually, I will post the event on my website. I try not to post the link, just send it privately,
Yes.
unless you are in my Patreon. That's my membership, my monthly membership. So there's two tiers that include the live circle. One's $20 and one's $25. And if you sign up for that, you get access to Circle, and then you'll automatically get the link sent to you every month through the Patreon site. Or you don't have to be a member though. You can just
Drop in
drop in.
any
Yeah,
month.
check it out.
So are
Yeah.
the months, I'm thinking of other moon circles I've done where it's like the strawberry moon is in the summer because that's when the strawberries are so ripe, or the wolf moon or the blue moon, or is it similar to that? Like do you know what March is?
So no, I wait
Oh,
until
good.
yes, I wait
Surprise.
until the first. So I'm not like pre-thinking anything, and then that way all the gals, then I do the rituals for myself and then share. So I don't know what March is, but I think I really feel like it's in alignment with the season.
Mm-hmm.
So like February has been really about like creativity and this quickening that happens like underneath the surface. So maybe you're not seeing things blossom, but like trusting and knowing that things are going on underneath. Um, and I just was also tuning into the other messages of February, which is a little bit more on top of my heart, which is not from the book, but it was all about, again, creativity, like returning to that type of creativity that the Fool archetype in the tarot has, where you're just like blissfully unaware that anything negative could happen, and you're super stoked, and you take your bag and you're like on a journey, and you just believe that no matter what, it's going to be good. No matter what I create, no matter what happens, it's going to be awesome and magical. And that's what this month is really calling us to do. It's calling us to just be in that energy, stop worrying about the result of your creation, and just nurture where you're at. And the book is a really good, I feel like the book has been this beautiful affirmation and reminder that the journey is really all that matters. Like every day I do what I love, and yet I'll still run into these things where I'm like, well, one day hopefully I can just do this, or one day but it's like, but every day I'm doing exactly what I want and exactly what I love. So like, what is it I'm trying? Like, if I could just stop thinking any further ahead, we got to make some planning, we got to do some nurturing, but like the fact that I think I'm going to be happy if X happens later, it's like, no, X will happen later, and then I'm just going to want Y. I'm just going to want something else. So the book really brings you into presence. Like it just brings you into presence. And then when you're doing that in a container of a bunch of other people, it just feels really thick and like juicy, and like, oh yeah, like we're all doing this together. So you feel supported. It doesn't feel like you're just jumping off a cliff.
Okay, good. I like the sound of this. I can't believe how quickly an hour goes by. And I feel like everything that you've said could be the possible answer to this last question. Um, but I'll ask you anyways. So, what what are and it can be more than one answer. It's okay if it's not it's hard to
You
answer
know me
just
already in
one.
an hour.
What are some words of wisdom that you live by?
um, Words of wisdom that I live by. I mean, it's interesting. I think about, actually, the first thing that came to my mind is this quote by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. He says, if I asked you to tell me everything you loved, how long would it take for you to tell me you loved yourself?
Yes, isn't that a quote that you have? You have that somewhere. I just
It's
heard
on my
that today.
signature line.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
on
I
my
was like,
signature
wait,
line.
I know this.
That's the first thing that came to my mind, because I feel like I just feel like that kind of sums up the journey for me, is like, yeah, like living a life of self-love. And then also I'm so passionate about it that I just want to share it with any woman possible who wants to remember who they are and find that journey inside themselves. Like,
Yeah.
it's been the most empowering process to release my story and feel freedom. And I just want everyone to feel that. We all deserve to feel that while we're here.
Yeah. And it's like giving this permission to, it's okay to love yourself. It's okay to say, I do love myself. It's okay to think of yourself too. I've read that. It's funny, leading up to recording this, when I go back on our thread, I keep rereading that quote, because when I think about all the things I love, it hasn't come up for me yet. And so I keep rereading that going, oh, well, I love hiking. I love being outside. I love my animal, all these other things that I love. It's so interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. All right. It's Marisa, right? Marisa.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
I'm so used to seeing with two S's, so I keep wanting to say Marissa,
Marissa.
which I bet
My
you
whole
hear all the time.
my whole life.
Your
It's
whole
like,
life.
yeah. Like,
But
no, it's
Marisa.
Marisa. It's Marisa. It's Marisa. That's fine. So used to it.
I'm lucky that I know Christina, and she talks about you a lot too. She's always like, Marisa said this and Marisa said that. And so I feel like I know you from afar. We were talking
Yeah.
about that before we started recording. I feel like I know you.
I know. Well, this has been so, like, I'm so excited. I just love you. I want to talk to you all the time now.
Likewise, and I'm definitely coming to next month, March 1st,
Oh, yay.
Moon Circle.
Yeah.
God, I've been missing those. I've been missing those so much. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I'm waiting for. It's funny that you said people feel scared and intimidated. And it's like, this is the thing that I do for a living right now. I show up and I create these containers and I ask people to join me in their practice. And for some reason, I have this aversion to showing up myself. So
Yeah.
that's a good lesson to remember.
Yeah.
And March 2nd is my birthday. So what a great way to start off.
I'm March 12th is my birthday. So are you Pisces?
Yes.
Okay, I was like,
Oh,
I feel like she might be Pisces because we have
yes.
some similarities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, how cool.
Wanting
Happy
to
birthday.
create a magical container at all times,
Yes.
like everywhere I look, or even when I close my eyes. That is my goal.
Yes. Yes. I love it.
Well, thank you, Marisa.
Yeah. Thank you.